He pushed the bull away, wanting nothing to do with it. But that night it returned, with his missing wallet. What happens next will leave you speechless. Rowan Telford stopped dead in his tracks, his breath misting in the cold morning air. Just ahead, in the broken gap of the fence at Greyfall Meadow, a massive black bull stood with its head lowered, steam curling from its nostrils. The animal's muscles bunched beneath a slick hide, each shift of its weight rippling with controlled power. Its hooves tore at the damp soil, sending clumps of earth flying, the sound sharp against the otherwise still valley. He hadn't expected this. When his neighbor, Elias Ward, told him a few fence posts might be loose, Rowan imagined hammering and nails, not facing a beast that looked like it could crush him in seconds. There was no brand on its side, no rope trailing from its neck, nothing to say it belonged to anyone. That alone unsettled him. Every ranch in the valley marked their cattle. This one was different. The bull's dark eyes locked on him. Rowan felt an instinctive prickle along his spine, the same warning a man gets when he knows he's being sized up. Not by a predator, but by something that refuses to be moved. The cold, damp air clung to his clothes, but the back of his neck was hot with tension. The animal took a step forward. Rowan's hands twitched toward the length of fence post he carried, more out of reflex than plan. His boots squelched in the mud as he shifted his stance. "Easy," he said softly, though his voice carried more to steady himself than to calm the bull. The bull's ears flicked forward, but its head dipped lower, the muscles in its neck tightening. Then it charged. Rowan barely had time to think. He moved toward the animal instead of away, the only way to keep from being bowled over. Bracing his feet, he shoved with all the strength he had, his shoulder slamming into the bull's flank. The impact jolted through him like hitting a wall, but it was enough to send the bull sidestepping into the open stretch of meadow instead of straight through him. The animal snorted, shaking its head, mud spraying from its hooves. Rowan stumbled back, heart pounding in his throat, every instinct telling him not to turn his back. They stared at each other for a moment that felt like a standoff between equals. Then the bull stamped once, exhaled in a sharp huff, and retreated to the far side of the field, watching him with eyes that seemed far too deliberate for livestock. Rowan's hands trembled as he straightened, his breath uneven. His shoulder throbbed from the impact, but he told himself it was over. The danger had passed. Still, his thoughts spun. Why would a bull be out here without a mark, alone, acting like it owned the land? He kept his eyes on it as he skirted the fence, making his way back toward the dirt road that led to town. Halfway there, a familiar routine pulled his mind back toward the ordinary. He reached into his jacket pocket for his wallet. He needed to stop by Meyer's shop for feed and oil before heading home. His fingers brushed empty fabric. He checked the other pocket. Nothing. The realization struck hard. It must have fallen when he'd shoved the bull. He turned to glance back at the meadow, but the bull was no longer by the fence. The mist was thicker now, curling low over the grass, and the gap in the fence looked like an open mouth. Rowan exhaled sharply, more in frustration than fear. It was just a wallet, but it carried his day's cash, his identification, and, more importantly, the one photograph of his father he still kept. He considered going back immediately, but the memory of that charge was still fresh. Even if the bull had wandered off, searching the churned mud in the low light would be pointless. Instead, he decided to get what he could in town on credit and return in the afternoon when the fog lifted. The walk back to his cabin was slow, his boots heavy with mud, but he didn't notice the weight as much as the nagging unease in his chest. Something about the bull's gaze lingered in his mind, sharp and focused, like it had understood the moment better than he did. By nightfall, the sky was a wash of gray, rain beginning to fall in soft, steady lines against the tin roof of the cabin. Rowan had eaten in silence, the fire warming the small single-room space, but his eyes kept flicking to the window. Beyond the glass was darkness and the faint sway of pine trees. The sound of rain on the roof was steady, but beneath it, another sound began to grow, a slow, rhythmic crunching, like boots or hooves on wet gravel. Rowan froze. The sound came closer, heavy, purposeful. He moved to the window, lifting the curtain just enough to peer outside. There, in the silvery wash of moonlight breaking through the clouds, stood the same black bull. Its hide was slick with rain, the water running in rivulets down its broad frame. Its head was lowered, not in threat but in something else. Waiting. The animal was motionless except for the slow rise and fall of its breath. Rowan's gaze dropped, and his heart stumbled in his chest. Clamped gently between the bull's teeth was something small and rectangular. Even through the rain and darkness, he recognized it instantly. His missing wallet. Rain slid down Rowan Telford's face in cold rivulets as he stared at the animal in the moonlit clearing outside his cabin. The black bull stood still, its powerful frame glistening under the downpour, breath curling from its nostrils in pale clouds. Slowly, it lowered its head, and with a deliberate motion, released something onto the wet grass. Rowan's heart gave a sharp thud. Even from where he stood at the threshold, he recognized the shape, his wallet. He hesitated for a moment, gripping the doorframe, mind torn between disbelief and caution. This was no ordinary behavior for a bull. The sheer impossibility of the moment felt almost unreal. But the animal didn't move to charge. It simply stood, head slightly lowered, watching him with those dark, steady eyes. Carefully, Rowan stepped out into the rain. His boots sank into the saturated ground, sucking at his heels with each movement. The air smelled of wet earth and pine sap, mingled with the faint, musky scent of the bull. The patter of rain on the tin roof faded behind him, replaced by the steady drumming on his hood and shoulders. The bull didn't shift, didn't flick an ear, didn't even snort. Rowan stopped a few feet away, crouching to pick up the wallet. It was clean, too clean. He opened it, expecting waterlogged bills and ruined paper, but instead found everything perfectly dry, as if the leather had been shielded from the rain. "How?" The word slipped out before he could stop himself, a whisper swallowed by the rain. He glanced up, half expecting the animal to react, but the bull simply stepped back, hooves squelching in the mud. For the briefest moment, its gaze flicked toward the distant tree line, then back to Rowan, as if suggesting something. Before Rowan could speak again, the bull turned. Its massive shoulders rolled with each step as it moved away, the darkness swallowing it whole. Rowan stood alone in the rain for a long moment, the wallet clutched in his hand, his mind tangled with questions. Was the bull trained? Who could have trained it? And why in the world would it go to the trouble of returning a man's lost property? He slept little that night. Lying in bed, he listened to the rain fade to a soft mist against the cabin's roof. His thoughts circled endlessly. There was intent in the bull's eyes, a sharpness he couldn't ignore. That wasn't mere coincidence or animal instinct. Something was guiding it, or something had been taught to it. By the time the first gray light filtered through the curtains, Rowan had made his decision. He needed answers, and the only way to get them was to follow. He moved with quiet purpose, packing a small satchel, dried meat, a water flask, a coil of rope, a hunting knife, and a folded tarp. His hands lingered on the rifle rack before he took down his old field rifle. The metal was worn smooth where his father's hands had once gripped it, but the barrel was still clean and true. He didn't intend to use it unless necessary, but out there, necessity could arrive quickly. The ground was still soft from the night's rain, making the bull's trail easy to find. Deep round hoofprints pressed into the mud, spaced in long, confident strides. Rowan followed them past the meadow, down a slope where the mist pooled like water in a hollow, then into the darker shadows of Greyfall Woods. The forest canopy caught most of the morning drizzle, but droplets still fell in erratic plinks from the branches above. Each sound seemed sharper in the heavy stillness. Rowan's boots muffled in the damp leaf litter, his eyes scanning the path ahead for movement. At times he could hear faint noises in the distance, the snap of a twig, the brush of foliage, but they faded before he could decide if they belonged to the bull or something else. An hour passed. The air grew cooler as the trees thickened, and the ground sloped upward toward a ridge. Rowan crested it and stopped dead. Below him, in a shallow clearing, lay the remains of a campsite. Torn tarps flapped weakly in the breeze, their edges stained with mud. Crates lay overturned, spilling nails, empty cans, and shredded cloth. Scraps of paper were scattered across the wet ground, some curling at the edges, others plastered to the soil. Rowan descended cautiously, his boots slipping slightly on the damp slope. In the center of the mess, half buried under a fallen tarp, was something that sent a chill through him. A chain collar, thick enough for a creature the size of the bull. The links were heavy, each one rusted except for the inside edges, worn bright as if they had been recently strained and rubbed. He crouched to examine the scattered papers. Many were covered in unfamiliar symbols, jagged lines and curves that meant nothing to him. Others bore lists of names and dates, the handwriting cramped and hurried. The language wasn't one he recognized, but the repetition of certain words made his skin crawl. A faint sound snapped his head up. Footsteps. Rowan rose slowly, his rifle hanging loose at his side, and turned toward the trees at the edge of the clearing. From between the trunks, 3 men emerged. All wore long, dark coats, their boots caked with mud. The first was broad-shouldered, his face hard and expressionless, but with eyes that seemed to weigh and measure Rowan in a glance. The second was lean, moving with a restless, twitching energy, his gaze darting to the shadows as though expecting attack. The third was older, gray streaking his beard, but his posture was rigid, his steps deliberate. They stopped when they saw him, surprise flashing briefly across their faces. "You're not supposed to be here," the broad-shouldered man said, his voice low and edged. Rowan didn't answer. His eyes flicked toward the second man's hands. He was carrying something long, metal-tipped. It took a moment for recognition to set in. A cattle pole. Rowan's stomach tightened. That was no rancher's tool. Not here, not in this context. These men were hunting, and the only thing in these woods that matched that collar's size was the black bull. The older man's eyes narrowed, his voice rasping. "Have you seen it?" Rowan's fingers shifted slightly on the rifle strap, though he kept his posture loose. "Seen what?" he said, his tone flat. The broad-shouldered man stepped forward, boots sinking in the wet ground. "Don't play games. That animal belongs to us." The word belongs struck him wrong. There was no legal claim in the man's tone, only possession, the kind that came from force. Rowan's thoughts churned. If they were after the bull, and if the bull had gone to such lengths to return his wallet, then maybe it had been running from them. His gut told him these men were dangerous. He shifted his stance slightly, not enough to provoke them, but enough to show he wasn't about to be herded like livestock himself. The lean man's grip tightened on the cattle pole, and his gaze flicked toward the trail behind Rowan. Something moved in the brush beyond them, loud enough that even the broad-shouldered man glanced back. And in that heartbeat, Rowan knew. The bull was still close. The men didn't seem to notice the way Rowan's eyes tracked the shadows, but his pulse quickened. Whatever had brought them here, it wasn't just about an animal. There was something more at stake. And the way the older man's jaw tightened as he glanced toward the trees told Rowan one thing with absolute certainty. The men were not farmers, and they were hunting the bull. The stranger's eyes locked on Rowan with a cold, appraising sharpness. The tallest one, a broad-shouldered man with a jagged scar running from temple to jaw, stepped forward through the mud, the weight of his boots pressing into the clearing as if each step was a deliberate challenge. "That animal belongs to us," he said, his voice low and even, yet carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Rowan's stomach tightened. There was something in the way the man said "belongs" that made the word feel wrong, predatory. It wasn't the language of a farmer reclaiming lost livestock. It was the voice of a man speaking about possession through force, about something taken rather than tended. The truth struck Rowan with sudden clarity. The bull had not wandered away from them. It had escaped. Without time to think, Rowan decided to bluff. "I haven't seen it," he said, keeping his tone neutral but letting his fingers slide closer to the strap of his rifle. His pulse quickened, not because he thought they believed him, he could see in their eyes they didn't, but because he knew how quickly this could turn violent. The man with the scar gave a slow, humorless smile. His gaze flicked to the man on his left, who began to move in a wide arc, circling to Rowan's flank. The third man, lean, restless, and carrying the cattle pole, cast a quick glance at the trail Rowan had come from, his expression tightening as if expecting to see something emerge. The air in the clearing felt charged, heavy with the knowledge that a wrong move would set everything in motion. Then the stillness shattered. A deafening crash of branches erupted from the brush to Rowan's right. The sound was deep, heavy, and fast, hoofbeats pounding the sodden earth with the force of a landslide. The bull exploded into the clearing like a force of nature, its massive head lowered, horns glinting as it charged directly at the man holding the cattle pole. The man's eyes went wide. He stumbled back in a spray of mud, throwing himself aside just as the bull thundered past, the ground trembling under its weight. The three men scattered instinctively, boots slipping in the wet grass. But instead of continuing through the clearing, the bull slowed, wheeled around with a surprising agility for its size, and planted itself firmly between Rowan and the strangers. Its muscles bunched, and it lowered its head, steam curling from its nostrils as it gave a long, sharp snort, an unmistakable warning. Rowan's breath caught. This wasn't random aggression. The bull was positioning itself, defending him. The three men hesitated, their surprise visible even through the tension in their stances. The scarred man's gaze flicked between Rowan and the animal, his jaw tightening in thought. "That's no ordinary bull," he said at last, his voice carrying over the soft hiss of new rain beginning to fall. His eyes fixed on Rowan with something that felt more like calculation than threat. "It carries something we need." The words sank deep into Rowan's thoughts, setting off a chain of uneasy questions. Something they needed? His gaze drifted to the bull, scanning its thick, rain-darkened coat, until he caught a faint gleam under the animal's neck. Beneath the coarse hair, half hidden, was a small metal capsule, no larger than a coin, fastened to a short strap. Whatever it was enough to make these men hunt the creature through a storm and into the depths of Greyfall Woods. The rain thickened, running in rivulets down Rowan's face. The men began to close in again, their movements slow and measured, their eyes never leaving the bull. Rowan's instincts screamed at him. Staying here meant being cornered. He took a step toward the bull, speaking low enough for only it to hear. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice steady despite the thudding of his heart. "Let me through." To his astonishment, the bull shifted its stance, stepping just enough to the side to give him a narrow path toward the tree line. The move was deliberate, almost as if it understood. Rowan tightened his grip on the rifle and moved. The forest loomed ahead, dark and thick, the kind of cover he could use to vanish. But he didn't get the chance. A sudden blur of movement came from his left. The lean man lunged, arm outstretched, fingers clawing for Rowan's shoulder. The bull bellowed, the sound rolling like thunder, and the clearing erupted into chaos. The fight was quick and brutal. Rowan barely had time to think, only to react. The man on his left lunged first, but Rowan swung the butt of his rifle hard, the crack of wood against bone sending the attacker stumbling back with a grunt of pain. Before Rowan could regain his stance, another man caught his arm in a crushing grip and yanked, twisting until Rowan felt the sharp pull of muscle threatening to tear. His teeth clenched against the pain, vision narrowing. Rain slicked the ground beneath them, turning every step into a desperate fight for balance. The bull, massive, relentless, charged again with a roar of breath and pounding hooves. Its horns sliced the air, forcing the men to scatter or be gored. Mud sprayed in wide arcs as one man tumbled sideways, scrambling to his feet with panic flashing in his eyes. Rowan seized the moment. His free hand reached instinctively toward the faint metallic glint under the bull's neck. The strap was slick, the clasp stubborn, but he managed to unclip the small capsule in a single, jerking motion. It was warm against his palm, the kind of warmth that didn't belong to metal left in cold rain. Without stopping to inspect it, he shoved it deep into his pocket, feeling its weight press against his thigh. His only thought now was survival, his and the bull's. The attackers regrouped quickly, but their advance was slower now, measured. One man wiped blood from his mouth and hissed something to the scarred leader, who spat into the mud, eyes fixed on Rowan. The bull pawed at the ground, its muscles coiled tight, ready to charge again. The standoff broke when the scarred man barked an order. As quickly as they had surrounded him, the men began to pull back, retreating into the wall of trees. They moved without turning their backs, their gazes hard and unyielding. "This isn't over," one called, his voice low but carrying over the clearing. Rowan stood frozen, chest heaving, until the forest swallowed their dark coats and the sound of their boots faded into the steady rhythm of rain. Only then did he glance down at his pocket. The capsule seemed heavier now, as if it knew the danger it carried. He drew it out, the metal slick with water but still radiating that faint, unnatural warmth. By the time he reached his cabin, night was pressing in, the rain reduced to a mist that clung to his clothes. He lit the oil lamp on the table, casting a pool of yellow light over the rough wood. Setting the capsule down, he hesitated. The fight still clung to him, mud on his boots, the ache in his shoulder where the man had wrenched his arm. But curiosity was stronger than caution. The clasp opened easily beneath his fingers. Inside was a piece of folded waterproof paper, creased and worn. Rowan smoothed it flat, his eyes tracing the uneven handwriting. Coordinates. A string of numbers that meant little without a map. Beneath them, a single name. Calder. He whispered it aloud, testing the weight of it. Calder. The name meant nothing to him, but the deliberate way it had been written, clear, precise, almost reverent, told him it mattered to someone. He looked toward the window. Outside, the bull stood near the tree line, its dark shape a watchful shadow against the silver wash of fog. The animal had carried this capsule for who knew how long, and the men in the woods were willing to risk their lives to reclaim it. That was all Rowan needed to know. Over the next week, he changed everything about his routine. His cabin, once a place of simple solitude, became a fortress. He reinforced the shutters with extra boards, lined the door with heavy crossbars, and stacked firewood inside to avoid leaving tracks around the property. Trips into town were rare and quick, never longer than an hour. The bull stayed close, as if it understood the danger. Rowan cleared the meadow behind his home, building a crude but sturdy shelter of timber and tarpaulin. He named the animal Bran, a name that came to him without thought but felt right when he said it. Bran moved with an awareness that unsettled Rowan. Sometimes at night, Rowan would wake to the sound of its hooves shifting in the grass, and he would see the bull standing at the edge of the meadow, head turned toward the forest. Its ears would flick, body tense, as if listening for something deep within the trees. By the seventh day, fog had settled heavy over the valley, smothering sound and turning the world into shades of pale gray. Rowan moved through his morning slowly, checking the perimeter of the property, his breath clouding the air. When he reached the mailbox at the end of the dirt lane, he noticed it immediately. A single envelope resting inside. No stamp, no address. Just his name written in black ink, each letter straight and deliberate. He tore it open where he stood, the damp air curling the edges of the paper. The message inside was short, the kind of brevity that left no room for misunderstanding. "We know you have the capsule. Meet us at the coordinates, or we'll come for it. And for the bull." Rowan read it twice, his jaw tightening with each word. The paper crinkled in his fist. When he returned to the cabin, Bran was grazing in the meadow, its massive head lowered to the wet grass. The animal looked peaceful, unaware, or perhaps unwilling to show, that danger was closing in. Rowan stood there for a long moment, watching the slow, steady rhythm of the bull's movements. The world had shifted in the space of a week, and there was no undoing it. He folded the letter carefully, slid it into his jacket pocket, and exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. His quiet life was over. Whatever lay ahead was bigger than a lost wallet, and it had just begun. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores themes of misjudgment, unexpected loyalty, and the profound bonds that can form between humans and animals. This narrative aims to highlight the importance of empathy, challenge assumptions, and remind us that a true friend can be found in the most unlikely of places.